G'day folks, today you are in for an absolute treat, especially motorsport fans. We're going to have a chat to Todd Hazelwood, Adelaide's own Todd Hazelwood from Brad Jones Racing, and I'm going to ask him about the rumour that could we see the Grand Prix coming to Adelaide at the Bend if it's not in Melbourne next year or in the future. We'll find out more about that. Looking forward to hearing what Todd has to say, plus much more on Legends with Bevo. Todd Hazelwood from Brad Jones Racing. Great to have you on Legends with Bevo, mate. Obviously, we're back at the Bend in Tailem Bend this weekend, the weekend after. Now, the Bend has actually been recognised November last year as the #1 international motorsport facility in the world. How good for South Australia and how good to have it back again at the Bend this weekend and the weekend after.
Yeah, it's really exciting to be back in South Australia racing once again. For a while there, we weren't sure if we'd be racing at the Bend or not. So it's obviously been a really interesting year. Obviously, we've had a lot of complications with COVID-19, putting a pause on our Supercars program, and obviously with border restrictions being put in place, it made it really difficult for us to know if we'd be able to race here or not. So fantastic here for me to be racing my home state once again and to have 2 race weekends in a row. It's been a really unique season. Obviously, racing at the Bend, it's, as you mentioned, it's a world-class facility. It's fantastic for Supercars to be racing here, and it turns out we'll be having a really strong crowd, which we haven't been able to have in recent events during this year with the new edition of COVID. It's made it really hard for us to go back to our spectacular show that we normally try to put on. So, yeah, looking forward to the Bend and, racing in front of the home crowd and see what we can achieve.
And what's the format like, Toddy, for those people out there? How's it going to work this Saturday and Sunday and the following weekend as well?
Yeah, for obviously with COVID, we've condensed our races. So instead of having longer endurance style of races, normally it was, for this year, it was actually going to be the Tailem Bend 500, which would traditionally have a co-driver in the car, 500-kilometre race on a Sunday, leading into what would be the Bathurst 1000. But for now, we've actually condensed that into 3 sprint races. So we've got qualifying and a race on Saturday, and then we go back-to-back on Sunday with another 2 races, another 2 qualifying sessions once again. So action-packed couple of days. So the cars will be on track from early hours of Saturday morning with practice, straight into qualifying, then a race in the afternoon. So it's for those people that are out watching it, they'll have plenty of action to enjoy.
And what sort of capacity can we have at these particular races as well, Toddy?
At the recent events, they've been limited to roughly about 10 to 15,000 for the day. But for the Bend, they're hoping to have crowds exceeding over 30,000. So, the number should be much larger going into these 2 weekends, which is fantastic for us as a sport. And it's great to see those fans up on the hill with the parking view, which is really common at the Bend Motorsport Park, where you can literally drive your car, put your esky in the back and enjoy the Supercars action.
Oh, how good. I think I might have to pop along for one of those days. It sounds like a ripper. Now, in terms of this year, you mentioned before the COVID situation. Obviously, it's been a heck of a year for all of us. And but one of the positives has been, like you mentioned, you've been able to get the racing happening, and it's been a really good season. How have you coped with being in the hubs, and how have you and your team sort of been going this year? Because it's been, a unique situation.
Yeah, 100%. Unprecedented times, and who would have thought starting this year's championship that we would have such a journey that we've been through. It's been a tremendous sacrifice in particular, to the crews who have literally packed their bags. For all of us now, it's been over 9 weeks since we left our homes, and we've been living out of a suitcase seats and sleeping in hotels and trying to keep our sport alive. It's been a tremendous sacrifice, and for me, I'm pretty fortunate. I love going racing, and that's what that's my life. That's what I love doing. But obviously, we've got some people like mechanics and engineers and team personnel that are involved in our program and Supercars that put the whole thing together. They've got kids and families and things like that are at home. And it's been obviously a very different sort of circumstance that we're not really used to. But fortunately, we've been able to do a lot of racing. Our calendar got revamped. Obviously, we had 3 months. We were literally all stuck at home in the peak of lockdown. And then there was an opportunity to go back racing again. We had a rejig calendar. As I mentioned before briefly, we went to then sprint format races. So instead of having pit stops with fuel, we eliminated fuel strategy out of our races just from a personnel point of view to work in with the COVID restrictions of how many people we could have in a garage, essentially. So trying to reduce costs as well, which was a big part of that. And so far the sport has come back swinging. With our TV ratings have been great. We've had some spectacular racing. We've had lots of different winners this year, lots of different faces on the podium, including myself for the first time. And from my own performance point of view, we've had a really good run.
And what a first year as well. You're obviously at a new team this year, Brad Jones Racing, crossed across from Matt Stone Racing. Why the move across, mate? And talk to us through the differences between the two teams.
Yeah, it's been a really exciting year for my first season at Brad Jones Racing in a number 14 car. I've really enjoyed it. It's certainly stepping into a new team with a lot of capability and a much larger capacity. I've got 3 extra teammates that I've never had before, coming from a single car outfit. But yeah, it was a big change. For me, I was with Matt Stone Racing for over 6 years. Felt very much part of the family. I used to live with Matt himself, and very much it was a big change for me. Obviously, going from Queensland, I then moved to Melbourne to then get closer to the team at Albury and working with those guys there. So yeah, lots of differences. I left the team at Matt Stone Racing. There was about 16 guys employed full time. And then when I went to Brad Jones Racing, there's about 50 odd people there. So logistically a lot different, lots of new names to learn and relationships to build. And when COVID come along, it kind of put a pause on everything. And I actually couldn't go see the workshop because it was over the other side of the border in Albury, and I was stuck in Melbourne. So it was a little bit of a challenge. But with since we've gone back racing, we got our first podium at Sydney Motorsport Park, which was second round in back racing. And just recently, I got my first pole position in the Supercars Championship. So to be one of only 64 drivers to ever achieve that was pretty special. So for my time at Brad Jones Racing has been really successful so far.
Congratulations on that. We'll get to that in a moment, mate. I just wanted to ask you, one thing we see, of course, in the AFL and other sports is, players changing teams all the time and stuff like that. And, I've played against mates and ex-teammates and stuff like that in different sports, and it's been lots of fun. Is there a fair bit of banter between you and the guys from Matt Stone Racing as well, seeing as you know them so well?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I still get along with a lot of the guys there within the team. As I said, they were my best mates when I was living in Queensland. We hung out together. When we went at the workshop, we went to the pub together. We did everything, So it was, those bonds you don't lose. And although there's a lot of rivalry that's amped up on the TV, when we are essentially a moving circus. We're all one big family, and we all still catch up. And it's good. Whenever we out qualified each other, or we're on the front row, or whatever it may be, there's always a good level of respect. And it's just good to. One thing in sport and particularly motorsport, you never burn your bridges, and that's something that I've always tried to pride myself on. And it's good to still have those relationships, even though we've gone on to different things in life.
And now let's talk about your podium finish and the pole position, mate. Obviously, you mentioned before the 6 years at Matt Stone Racing. What a year, though, your first year at Brad Jones Racing you've had, and what do you put it down to, with the season you've had so far?
Yeah, I think for me, I've kept maturing as a driver, and I think last year proved that we were knocking on the door of performances that were, starting to get consistently inside the top 10. And for me, this year, that was definitely a goal to do that and aiming for podium finishes if possible. And yeah, it was crazy to come back for our returning back from racing after the COVID pause. In our first round back, we were knocking on the door of a race win until we had a mechanical failure. But then we went back with redemption. We got a podium the following round, which was great. And we've been consistently in the top 10, and the cars have had pace. That's always the biggest thing in our industry is you're only as good as your crew and your car that you've got under your belt. So for me, I'm really fortunate. I'm part of a team now that's given me the opportunity to consistently be racing at the front. We just recently, just almost got taste of a race win. If things could have potentially gone our way at Townsville, just recently gone by. As you mentioned, we got our first pole position, managed to lead majority of the race, and unfortunately, just with our strategy, the way when we did our pit stop, we just didn't have the tyre life of the other guys, and with a late safety car, it condensed the field, and we got swamped in the last handful of last few laps of the race. So that was potentially one that got away. But the main thing is we're up the front, we're battling the regulars, and for me, it's really exciting. And hopefully, some more success is just around the corner, and there's no better place to do it at Tail and Bend in front of my home crowd, I reckon.
Absolutely. Fingers crossed, mate. And yeah, keep up the great work. Now, during the COVID lockdown, I found something really interesting. Like yourself, you're finding different things to do during the lockdown. And one thing I found really interesting, Toddy, especially watching the news at nights, was watching the E-Series and just seeing, how some of the drivers went and how you get Formula One drivers joining in and stuff like that. How'd you find this? Was it boring or did you enjoy it?
No, it was full on and it was serious. Don't get me wrong. I think the real competitor come out of us all. And although it's perceived as just a computer game, it's very much lifelike. The way you drive the car and the technique you required. It's almost harder than the real thing in some ways. To be fast in that game is tremendously tough. The amount of hours I spent practicing and rehearsing was ridiculous. I'd spend 3 hours trying to find half a tenth to a tenth of a second. And it all paid off. So we had a lot of fun with it. And obviously, when we couldn't go to the race meetings and, we're commercially obligated with TV and our sponsors and all the like, and we thought, well, what can we do to try and put on some entertainment for the punters watching at home and the people that normally support our supercar program. And while no other sport was doing anything, we were actually able to capture quite a large audience during that time. And doing our Wednesday night racing it was a lot of fun. And yeah, it was great that all the supercar drivers got involved, and not a lot of us had a simulator at our disposal, me and myself included. So it was a challenge to put it all together in a short time frame, but we ended up putting 10 rounds together, and it was a lot of fun and certainly fulfilled a gap that was certainly missing within worldwide sports. And yeah, I think the statistics showed that we were able to generate over 500,000 new followers to supercars, which was fantastic, based off capturing into, trying to capture that esports sector. And also while there wasn't any other live sport being produced, it was a really good thing for us as a category.
What a result. That's definitely a positive there for sure, mate. And for those people out there that have an interest in terms of the street circuit versus a bend, what do you find being the major differences between the two?
Yeah, the street circuits provide a really unique challenge for us drivers. So obviously you're racing on a surface that's traditionally driven by cars on everyday users. So you got oil leaking out of cars, you've got debris and all that sort of stuff, and it doesn't get used and maintained over the year until the one time of the year. So the street sweeper goes out, it cleans the surface roughly, and the cars slip inside over the different surfaces and the big crown on the road that you wouldn't normally have over a road circuit, or is in a permanent circuit, I should say. And then you got the challenge of the big curbs that they put in place, because traditionally a lot of the street circuits have got more so 90-degree corners, so a lot of stop and starting in the race car. And then you got concrete barriers. So the commitment levels that you need from a driver point of view is certainly increased. If you get it wrong, you're in the concrete wall. And I know for a fact that those concrete walls do not move. They hurt when you hit them. So, from a driver's point of view, it's a real challenge to get it right. And you set the car up a lot differently to a traditional permanent circuit. So, it adds a new challenge and a great spectacle for the fans, and ideally is traditionally placed in a very convenient area. Obviously, with the Superloop Adelaide 500, it's in the heart of the city, so you get a lot of people coming out and being a part of the show, which is ultimately what we try and do. We're trying to put on a great show for everyone watching at home, but obviously the people that are there as well to get amongst it.
And there's been some talk, if there's no Melbourne Grand Prix next year, obviously it's a bit of a rumour, it may not happen, but there's talk of maybe having a Formula One event at the Bend. I mean, how awesome would this be, Toddy? And your thoughts on that?
Oh, I'm a proud South Australian, so anytime we can take something away from Melbourne to win, I reckon. They took it away from us all these years ago, so why not have it back? But hey, who knows? It's as we all know, we're living in crazy times at the moment, so you never say never, that's for sure.
And just before I let you go, obviously the sad news now is that there will be no more Holdens being produced. What sort of cars do you think will replace them going forward? And what vehicles will we see on the road instead?
Yeah, it's going to be a really interesting time for us in the supercars world. Obviously, it got announced at the start of the year that would be no more Holdens and no more Commodores. So for us, that's the DNA of our sport. It's always been Ford versus Holden since the early 50s. It's going to be tough to replace such an iconic landmark in our sport. As I said, it's the DNA. So what we do from here on in, don't really know, to be honest. There's the supercars are currently working on a new concept, which is what they're labeling as Gen 3. So it'll be a new design of chassis, potentially a controlled motor, So it'd be the same if you got Ford or a Dodge or potentially a Camaro or whatever it may be. It's Toyota Supra. It's still going to be V8 orientated, which is great for the fans because V8 is the DNA of supercars. We all still call it V8 Supercars, although it's branded as Supercars Championship. So making sure that the entertainment factor is still there. So it's loud, it's fast, it's got a V8, so people still can relate to what people know as supercars. But we may see some new brands. There's talks you always hear on the grapevine of what the rumors, but there's talks of supposedly with Toyota, BMW, potentially Mercedes, Jaguar. So hey, who knows? I think it'll be great. We're going to see cars potentially 2- and 4-door models. Obviously now we've got the 4-door ZB Commodore and the 2-door Mustang, and supercars have been able to get the parity right this year and ensure that the racing's still close. Us as drivers are pushing harder than ever, and the teams are doing what they can. But the product that we want is that we want the field separated by nothing, and we're the closest touring car championship in the world, which is something to be really proud of. Townsville, we had 5 guys separated by less than 1/10 of a second for pole position, which is just crazy.
Wow.
And the whole field was separated by less than 7/10 of a second. And, over 24 drivers and over a minute lap time, I think is pretty impressive. So when you look at Formula One, obviously they're the pinnacle of world motorsport, but they've got cars separated by half a second at a time. And I think the racing's a little bit boring. So I think what supercars have got as a product is really cool. And is for us moving forward, it's important that we capture that and don't lose sight of the entertainment.
No, I reckon you've nailed it there, mate. You want to see close racing, and that's phenomenal to know that cars are so close and anyone can win on the day, like you said before, and yourself finishing on the podium earlier on this year. So, well, mate, towards the end of the season, hopefully, fingers crossed, if it's not at the Bend, I'm sure going forward we might see you winning a race this year, which would be wonderful. If not this year, I'm sure down the track we'll see it. Keep up the great work with Brad Jones Racing, and thanks so much for your time today. Great to chat again on Legends with Bevo.
No worries. Thanks for having me, mate. And bring on the Bend. And after that, we've got Bathurst. So if I can get a win there, I'll be a very happy man.
Fingers crossed, mate. Keep it up.